qui est une association d'éducation permanente en lien avec la gauche anticapitale, écologique, féministe et internationale. On a notamment donc, des camarades en Syrie et au Liban. Alors ce soir, donc, la conférence portera sur les mouvements populaires face aux rivalités USA-Iran. Donc un bref contexte avant de commencer. Donc, les tensions entre les USA et le régime iranien sont à nouveau au centre des débats médiatiques, comme on l'a vu récemment. Elles nous sont souvent présentées comme un jeu géopolitique d'intérêt extérieur et de dirigeants étatiques dans lesquels les peuples ne jouent aucun rôle. Nous souhaitions ici faire entendre la voix des populations de la région qui se révoltent massivement face au régime autoritaire, au fondamentalisme et à la domination des puissances impérialistes et régionales. Donc ici, on aura l'intervention de Nadine, qui est une Libanaise, donc féministe, militante, engagée aussi dans les luttes internationales à Bruxelles. Également donc Ahmad, qui est activiste syrien. Fariba, qui est féministe iranienne, membre du 8 March Collective Iran Afghanistan. Et enfin Reza, qui est militant communiste iranien aussi. Donc on va avoir les interventions des intervenantes et des intervenantes. Et après il y aura un débat, donc n'hésitez pas aussi à poser vos questions, mais aussi faire des remarques, etc.
Hello everybody. First of all, I'm supposed to give you a brief preview of what's happening in Lebanon in 15 minutes. It's going to take a miracle. I'm going to try and do it, but maybe some things will be lost. Second thing I would like to say, I am not a representative of the revolution. Do not write this anywhere. Representative of the revolution. I am not. I am just someone who's taking part in this very spontaneous, non-organized, non-centralized uprising. To begin, what's been happening in Lebanon, we have to look at two parts of the country. There is the political background and there is the economic background. Now, politically, it's a very old story. It's at least dating from the Sykes-Picot period when the region was divided. Of course, Lebanon was created, and then the rule was given, after the French colonizers left, to a Christian minority to rule over a Muslim majority where they were. Because we used to be part of Syria, and part of Turkey, and part of Palestine, etc. From there comes the confessional system. This was exaggerated during the Civil War, which was a direct result of all this baggage of history. And after the Civil War, we come to the Taif Accord, 1989, where the war stopped. But what happened is that all the warlords, the militias, went into the accord with their guns and came out with ministerial bags. They became the politicians. And for 30 years, they used a very neoliberal model, which it was based on linking the dollar to the American, linking the lira to the American dollar, borrowing a lot of money at ridiculous interest rates, and all done via families connected. So the banks were owned by families connected to the political class. So the country was being run as a private property for a few families. We reached a point where there was a big deficit. It's been going on for years. They borrow more money to close the deficit. It's not working until we reach the famous what's up tax, which I hate to say. In the beginning, people were, oh, what's up tax, and what is this? You're so shallow, you're. It's not about the what's up tax. It's about the fact that for 30 years, the government was taking everything that was in the pockets of the Lebanese and using it to borrow more money with or to spend it on themselves. These are all the politicians that have been from the war and still are, till now. And this was during the trash crisis in 2015, 2016. There was already a pre-revolution moment. We didn't succeed back then because for some reason there was no unity with the people. What's up, tax? People started protesting. Nobody believed what was going on. We have a big wound. That is the wound of the Civil War. And it's been sitting on our shoulders as a dead corpse that we take with us everywhere. People were always scared that if we revolt, we will have civil war again. So that was the big elephant in the room. This time it didn't work. People were on the street. They were done. They had nothing to lose anymore. There was already a crisis in the dollar, already a crisis with medicine, already a crisis with benzene going on for a year. People were losing their homes because they couldn't pay the mortgage anymore. They were losing their jobs, while the rich were getting richer. A bit like Belgium, and a bit like France, and a bit like Iran, and a bit like Syria. And it's the neoliberal model that puts profit over people. The protests started, and they were happening in all the country for the first time. Usually protests happen in Beirut. People come from far in buses, like a big party, and they protest in Beirut, and within 2 days it's finished, because the state can easily kettle them in Beirut and kill the spirit of any uprising that happens. This time the people thought, let's do it in our villages, in our towns, in our cities. So this is an example where nobody thought these people would be on the streets in this area. Nobody. We always thought they were bobo Christian fascists. But then we realized there are many hungry people among them. But we were so disconnected, we didn't see each other for a long time. The protests were happening. They were serious blockades of very important roads. They were trying to protest in front of the central bank. The bank is a big target, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. They were protesting basically everywhere. And for the first time, we knew that it's for real this time. I remember I had an exam the first day it started at my university, and I didn't sleep that night because I was just on my phone watching everything happening. Till mid-November, end November, there was serious escalations. There were many things done. The feminists all of a sudden had a big voice. They were very visible. They were the ones leading most of the chantings. They had beautiful slogans that were very intersectional, welcoming refugees, talking left versus right. LGBTQ+ all of a sudden had their space in the public sphere. Chanting for the domestic workers who are often from African countries in Lebanon who come to live based on a sponsorship system, modern-day slavery. All these slogans started popping up on top of the political discussion. Of course, the state didn't know how to deal with this. They're used to dealing with force against one group. This time they were confused. People were everywhere. They were united on their tactics, and there was no leadership. Nobody knew who was the leader. There was a very clear anti-American approach, but also very clear anti-Russian and Iranian approach. So the Lebanese, for the first time, were saying, excuse my French, fuck you, fuck you. They weren't going to have it anymore. And I'm showing you, like, this area, this is the hub of a political party that's called Amal, by one of the oldest warlords in Lebanon, Nabih Berri. He's the Speaker of Parliament for the last 30 years. He hasn't changed. We had a few prime ministers, not much, and then the presidents were changing, but he never changed. And they share the country. Some of them have the construction, they make money out of it. Another politician will have everything to do with infrastructure. Another politician will take the garbage, and they make money out of it at the expense of the people. So this is his area, and people, his own people, Shia Muslims specifically, were protesting against him. And that was the beauty of the protest this time in Lebanon, is that they were protesting from within the sect and within the village against their own leader. The people are sick of the sectarian regime that is sucking them dry through corruption. They did a few nice activities, peaceful, because we also have this imposed obsession with peaceful protesting, because we want to show the world that we are not violent and we have to always prove, believe us, we are revolting peacefully. So they did a human chain, they did a very big Tripoli. For example, Tripoli had a very big festival. It used to be portrayed all the time in our media as one of the most conservative, extremist Muslim city in Lebanon. And then we discover it's not. It was just the excuse, the portrayal of those people who have no service from the state whatsoever, by the way, to keep us separated. We discover that those people actually are not. They are the most active now in the no sectarianism discourse. And they are mostly Sunni Muslims. Protests were continuing. People were losing the momentum a little bit because they were tired. Because the state was using the approach of, okay, ignore them. They're not going to answer us. They were not answering us. They were not responding to anything of our demands, and there was a big list of demands. Any solution they came with was just a repetition of the past. So people were tired. They kept going. Women were all on the forefronts. And at some point there was the Independence Day. I will never forget this. Every year, the Independence Day is celebrated by an elite at the presidential palace in a closed ceremony where the army goes around parading their weapon that they never use except on people. And this time, for the first time, the Lebanese decided, we're doing the civil parade. That was a very big day. They did the civil parade to celebrate their independence. And it was all about dancing and arts, and immigrants, Lebanese immigrants living abroad, came and did a little act. It was like all the people ignored the official Independence Day and did their own. At some point, supporters of Hezbollah and Amal tried to break the protests because they were pissed off that people are, for the first time, swearing against Nasrallah. I don't know if you know who Nasrallah is, but he's the head of the Hezbollah. The guy basically fighting the resistance on the resistance axis. The biggest guy in Lebanon, and everybody's usually afraid of him. And for the first time, he was being cursed on the street in his area. Schools were closed, universities were closed, and still are for most of them. To replace that, there were public debates and public lectures in the middle of the street to talk about collectives, solidarity campaigns, help to each other, what is our constitution. They were giving people information they needed. Protesters were still blocking the road. There was a moment of calm in December. Yeah, Christmas holiday, even revolutionaries need it. And then in January they came back, and as you saw on the 18th and the 19th, the escalation happened. Because that's when people declared, on the 14th of January, they declared the week of wrath against banks. Because banks, from the beginning, have been refusing to give people their money. They have put a cap. They closed down for a few weeks. And now, for a long time, they have put a cap of $200 per week for small depositors. Not for the big depositors. The money is gone. The big depositors, in the first few weeks, there's enough proof of many big money transfers that were done to Switzerland. So they attacked the banks. They burned most of the banks in what is the most leftist street, Al-Hamra. And then they headed to Parliament, because Parliament was supposed to meet on the 17th or 18th. They tried to head to the Parliament, they wouldn't let them, and the police became very, very violent. And we're talking 4 people lost an eye, a few people lost hands, a guy got a rubber bullet in his genitals, and there are other serious head injuries with people who have lost memory and or need serious operations in a country where there's no more money. Huh? People don't have money. So these people need to be operated on as a result of police brutality, and they don't have the money to pay it. We are now collecting money to be sent by someone from Belgium by hand, because there's always scandal in these donation programs. And voila, the police started hitting, attacking, but the people are not giving up, and there was a serious confrontation. Most of the news said violence between protesters and the police. Bull fucking shit. The violence was from the state, and the rioters were just defending themselves with any means necessary. They didn't have guns. They didn't have weapons. They were breaking rocks. They were picking up whatever metal they see and throwing it. This girl climbed up all the way on the fence to jump. They broke her hands, as you can see. They broke her hands. They shot her at a very close range in her back with a rubber bullet, and she's in hospital now. So I think I had a few. Yes. The famous woman who beat the bodyguard who shot at protesters, so they were bodyguards of politicians shooting live bullets at people. And what now? I think there's no way back. People are going to continue until they win, if they win, or until a very nasty scenario like we saw happening in other Arab countries happens, and I hope not. Here's the role, in my opinion, of Europe or European activists to put pressure on their state not to intervene. And definitely the tear gas and the rubber bullets you saw in these pictures are from France. They were sent recently during the protests. So you need to work on campaigns to convince your states not to interfere. And I finish in 15 minutes.
It's my turn. So I am Ahmed. I am from Aleppo, and I don't prepare like that much talking about Syria. I think you maybe know like more than like that we know about like maybe Lebanon or Iran, but like maybe I can talk about like what is happening now, or maybe like from 6 months until now in Syria, in even if it's in the small free area with like we can say with the Syrian Free Syrian Army, or in the government area, or also like in Turkey, or what's happening. So now I don't know, as you know that the government or the regime in Syria, they took you can say 90% from all like the biggest city in Syria. We only still have like maybe we can say Idlib, and it's not like under the control of like we cannot like say under the control of good, like mostly of good people, but like there are a lot of people who support like the revolution, and they are like against the government. They are living there, and they are living in now a very bad situation. Also like the countryside of Aleppo, like the area behind Aleppo now, is also like had a very bad situation. Actually now, like Syria, it's like no one from Syria who rule like or he has like a decision about like what's happening in Syria. Like the decision in Syria, it's like between Russia and Turkey, and like mostly like between Russia and Turkey. So when they always like arrive to agreement about like when they always like arrive to the agreement about like these areas, they always like make, for example, you took this area and I will give you this area, and like it's always like that. And unfortunately, like the also like we can say 70%, because like the Free Syrian Army now, they don't have any chance. Like no one supports them. They lose the hope. Like they are very connecting to Turkey, so they now follow all the rules what they give them. So even if they told them like don't fight like the regime, go away from this area, they will go. Even now, also like there are some we can say some people from the Free Syrian Army, they went to Libya. They went to Libya to fight there, because like Turkey want them to go there. So the situation is very bad. If we talk like about the people who are living there, like in Idlib or in Syria, the situation now also like the regime is trying to take this area, because like it's very important. He has very like we can say two highway or roadway. This roadway, it's make connection between like the north and like the sea, and also like the north and the south, like between the biggest city in Syria like Aleppo and Damascus. And this like between this like two roadway, like it's like with the Free Syrian Army. So they want to take this like way to maybe make it easy for their business, and like they always like for transportation. So they are pumping like this area, and like they are killing the people who are living there, because they want to take this area for like we say, I don't know, for no reason, but like it's only because like Russia and Turkey like they arrived to agreement like that. This area has to be with the regime. And if we also like we can talk about like the economic situation now in Syria, it's super bad. Like the before the revolution start, like the $1 it was like 50 lira, and now like after 5 years it's like become more than 1,000. So the situation is very bad. Like there are some people who wait maybe for 2 days in the street just like to have how to say, like a bottle of gas, like to use it for cooking, or for like also like for the heating, and like everything is expensive. Like they like this, they live like very hard life. Also, like as I know, like because like there are too many Syrian people in Lebanon or in Turkey, they are also like they not like living a very good situation now in Turkey. Like they make a lot of problem like about Syria. Like even if you like, for example, if you want to travel from city to another city, you need a paper, you need like approval, like to appear it. Like it's like a small prison. It's like not that like they enjoyed like their life there. Even like in Lebanon, because like the old government, like in Lebanon, we like it's not like also like very good situation that like people who has there. and yeah, like I don't know, like if you, or maybe if you have any question, like maybe it will be easier, like to talk.
Okay. Good evening, comrades and friends. First of all, sorry for my English. I try my best because my English is not so good, but I try my best to give my points. I know it's difficult to speak about this conflict in a short moment. Of course, so brief as Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and America. It's not so easy. But I try to give a little bit a general view, and then I let Reza to give more concrete analyze about what's happening right now. I want to give this general view about what's happened in Middle East in the end of 20th century. Iranian revolution, so-called Islamic revolution, it was the last revolution of the 19th century. There were many other revolutions in Russia, China, in Latin America, and there were some other resistance and emancipationary movements in the different countries, like in Palestine and in Africa and so on. But the end of the century was the Iranian Revolution. But what came up to the power wasn't revolutionary force, was counter-revolutionary force who came to the power. It was Islamic fundamentalism, and they called themselves alternative of imperialism. They called themselves as an alternative in place of socialism, who was not true. We know that. Why it wasn't true? Because it wasn't an alternative for the imperialism. Because from the first day, they had their relation with imperialism in the, what we say, economical structure. Basically, they had their relation with imperialism. They never break their relation with imperialism. Never. 1 second, 1 minute. Never. They growing up in this relationship with imperialism, but in the superstructure, they have Islamic ideology. That they make them as a, what we say, unconventional state, as called, US called that unconventional. Why is unconventional? Why? Because it's not as the other normal capitalist country. They use Islam as a superstructure, but they are a capitalist country. That's the capitalist state. That's important to know. And they use Islam as a tool. We should know that. And in this case, the Islamic fundamentalism growing in whole Middle East. Of course, we had religion. We had this in Middle East, in the area, in Turkey, in Iran, in Arab Saudi, and the other countries. But it was Islam as a religion. But they use Islam as a, we should know, it's not a religion. They use Islam as a political movement, revolutionary political movement. That is important to know.
A bit like Muslim Brotherhoods.
It was the same. They have the same base, of course. And in this case, they came to the power. They used Islam to make a capitalist state with the superstructure. And in this case, what they built in whole the world and not in Middle East, it was two pools. One side, fake. One side, imperialism, so-called imperialism, that means it was USA. And the other side was fundamentalism, Islamic fundamentalism. And in these pools, they make two pools for the people to choose between bad and worse. Who is bad and who is worse? How you can say who is bad and worse? For the people who are living in these countries, worse means Islamic regime. Sometimes for the people who are living in USA, worse is Islamic terrorist. Who is bad and worse for them? They made these pools and they let us to choose between that. And that's why we want to say, in the same time, we are against both these pools.
Mm-hmm.
Both are reactionary. Both is outmoded. Mm-hmm. And for us is enough. Both are capitalist. Mm-hmm. And I should give this, how can I say, this point also, when in 1979, during the revolution, when the leftists, the communists, socialists, the revolutionary forces are active in the movement in Iran, they had poor knowledge about imperialism. They had poor knowledge. For them, imperialism was something inside of the outside of the country. For them, it was something in USA, in Western country. For them, imperialism wasn't a relationship. Imperialism is a relationship, economically relationship. And for them, when the Khomeini came to the power and he said, I'm anti-imperialist, they believed that Khomeini and this Islamic regime is anti-imperialism. But what means imperialism for us today? And that's very important to know, to understand the dynamic of this uprising in Middle East, in Iran, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and other countries. These are uprising against imperialism in total. Mm-hmm. It means they are against their own state and they are against intervention. That we should know. That's what we want to support as a progressist, as a feminist, as a revolutionary, as an anti-war movement, as a communist, socialist, I don't know. We should support this anti-imperialist movement. It means also in the same time against their own state too. And I should finish this part and I should give a little bit the history of this uprising in Iran right now. As you know, this Islamic revolution became to the power in 1979, and during these 30 years, of course, we had really, how can I say, oppression, repression in the country, and of course we had in the other side resistance. All these times, and of course the women movement was one of the really resistance between Iranian regime, student resistance, worker resistance, teacher resistance, and the other movements too. But what's happened during these 10 years? After this communication between Western country and Iran to make this nuclear negotiation, it was something changed in Iran too. They tried to have a normal and official relationship with neoliberalism. Before that, of course, they had their own relationship with neoliberalism, but during this way they could have official relationship, and for them was important because they had many economical crises, and for them it was a solution. They have to do that. And in this case, what they say, it's the class gap growing up, sorry for my English, class gap growing up. And of course, but day by day we had more poor people and more, as we say, corruption and so on and so on. I don't want to go too deep in, and you know what's the effect of the new liberalism in the third world countries. And in this case, we had resistance during this 35 years, I can say. And most of the time, what we had in these movement as a workers, women, student, mostly was the reformist movement. But in January 2018, Deima, we say, the movement of Deima. During this movement, we had a movement who started from very small cities. It wasn't the movement from the biggest cities and as a reformist movement. As she said, it was the cities that we called very religious cities, very fundamentalist people, poor people who are supporter of the state. Everybody thought they are supporters of the state, but uprising came from these cities. More than 100 cities started to come to the street, and they revolt. And of course, many of the people killed. In Iran, they start very directly. They get every time very seriously. Iranian regime, I mean. They killed many people. They arrest many people during this uprising. It was in 2018. After that, on base of this uprising, we had the Iranian regime has no legitimacy. And it was very important to change this reformist movement to the movement who wants to smash the system. They say we don't want whole Iranian regime, no more reformists, no more fundamentalists, and so on. We want to whole regime go out of this country, and we don't want more Iranian regime. After that, we had other uprising. It was in October 2019. It was after Iranian regime tripled the price of the benzene. It was tripleized, and the people came to the street. Nobody said any economical slogan. Nobody. They start with the political slogan, and they shot and they said, smash the Iranian regime. It was very important. It gives us that this movement is consciously against Iranian regime. And where this uprising start? It was from the ghettos of the big cities. It wasn't from the small cities. It was from the ghettos and suburb of the big cities, like Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, maybe this touristic city that you know about Iran and so on. They started from there, and the poor, very poor young teenagers and young people, they came to the streets, and they burned the banks. They burned the benzene banks, and they burned religious center too. It was very important. For them, it was clear. Religious center is connected to the power. Militant center is connected to the power. As a Sepah and Basij, they are very important places for the regime. They are militias of the regime. And they burn these places. And it means it is not unviolented. Okay, it wasn't non-violented movement. It was violented movement. And it means right now this movement wants to use this violence against regime. And it was the second step of this movement. And the third movement, of course, you know about the killing of Qasem Soleimani, this criminal general of Iranian regime. I don't want to speak about that. You knew about that in the news. After that, and after this funerary as a carnival in Iran. Everybody thought, oh, no more uprising in Iran, because they killed during during October, they killed more than 1,500 people, and they arrest 8,000 people. Can you imagine? And we, as activists and militant, we thought, oh, we need time because people, they are silent, they lose their hope. But after this funeral of this Qasem Soleimani, people came to the streets. That was important. Rebellion people, progressive young people. At top of that was a student movement with the radical slogans. We don't want no more Iranian regime. And of course the other political activists too, but it was important. Everybody thought, and also Iranian regime thought, after this killing of huge people on the street, they couldn't come to this street, but it was important to see people are in the street right now. And they continue this movement. This is the dynamic of the movement. But what is very dangerous right now? Of course, it's this dynamic. People of Iran, they are also between these two choices. Yeah. Iranian regime or war. That's very dangerous. What they had in Iraq, what they had in Afghanistan, and Iranian people too. Right now we should choose, I know not me as a communist, but people of Iran, they are between these two choices. Of course, we don't welcoming war. We never welcome the war, imperialist war. But in this case, we should build the movement who is against these both reactionary pools. And we should help the people, and we should have the leadership to say we should have very clear border with these two reactionary pools. It's my old speech, and sorry if it's more than enough.
My name is Reza. Thank you to organizers and comrades and friends who spoke before me. I will just put a point on the tension between Iran and USA in the last weeks, that I think you heard a lot about it, or you read a lot about it. The tension between Iran and US as a history actually is not the first one, of course not the last one, I think. And if you look at the Iranian regime as an official state under power after 1979, we see that during the 80s and 90s and first decade of new century and until now, they have in different periods and different moments, they have the sometimes acute tension, sometimes lighter. And I can just connect to the discussion before me. What did the Iranian regime in 80s to transform the militant, leftist or progressive democratic movement in whole Middle East when they came on the power, especially in Lebanon, especially in Palestine, especially in Iraq, etc., etc. And that was the time that they were close to each other, even when they had really contradictions between each other. And in 90s exactly when we see the wars in Middle East, and we see after war between Iran and Iraq, how they worked together in the first war in Gulf, how they worked together at the same time, how they were against each other, or they tried to show this picture. Exactly the beginning of new century, they did the same when they started to war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and later on, etc. That was the time that Iranian regime and US, they had big tension because of the terrorism of the Iranian regime, state terrorism in Europe and in other countries. So we have many different examples to show why they have at the same time connection, why they have the tension. The connection is because they are two states and they have their connection on the base of economic base and naft, actually petroleum, how they use that to put Iran as a kind of capitalist country and one state who can rule this economic deal in the world. And the other side, we see the political level that, as Fariba said, how Iranian regime has a different social program to rule the capitalist system, very different than United States and very different than Western capitalist countries and imperialists. So that's a big tension that we see in different ways in different countries. What we see in the last weeks actually in Iraq, we see that internationalist movement especially in Beirut, but in other cities in Lebanon too, in Iraq, especially in Baghdad, and the cities where the Iranian regime influenced a lot, like a Shiite city in south of Iraq, how they were internationalists and they tried to make a connection between different so-called movements. As you asked me, I said that's not a movement, it's an uprising. But they wanted to connect, to find a connection in different ways. I can say easily and freely that in Iran the uprising wasn't internationalist and it was very close for Iranian, and in many different ways I can say against the Arab world. It's a character of Iranian uprising, I have to say that. And one more point, as Clausewitz said that the war is the continuing of politics, we see that the tension between Iran and US is also when the different policy and different programs, their programs will be acute in different situations. They are both occupied in Iraq, just an example. They are both occupied in Iraq, like two countries with the army and proxy in Iraq, and they fight over there against, let's say, Daesh or different things, but at the same time they fight between each other too. Sometimes it's like the last time that they wanted to change the situation, and US they did. What was the effect? Actually, all people, they know the news, what happened actually. Soleimani, this guy, the one big criminal, tried to remove another criminal from a place, occupied country. But what happened after? For some weeks, all people here and around the world, we didn't hear anything from the movement in Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, etc. Many political prisoners, as Fariba said, in Iran. That's the way that their tension, every time when we follow the history between these two, we see how they rebuild the situation actually. And I think right now, when the tension is just personal opinion actually, I think when the tension is like that, they are well occupied to clearly negotiate about something else, to dealing their power, their influence in Middle East, or to reorganize like their influence points in Syria, in their working with Turkey, etc. And especially you see when the societies like Syria, like Lebanon, like Iran, Iraq, and I see from Afghanistan. Of course, we don't see in the news because they are not Iran, they are not Syria, they don't have big name actually like that. When the people are angry from both outmoded pools, outmoded alternatives, and they have to reorganize the situation. And I think now, to finish my point, the situation between the big powers, actually I can use the word imperialist, is really acute, and they are in some points that they have to reorganize their relation. As we see the Trump or extreme rights around the world, especially Trump. They are really saying no to all contracts, social contracts between the imperialist powers. They can say easily, we don't pay for NATO, we don't do like this in Middle East, and we do what we want. And you see from other side, the China, new powers, etc., they are coming, so they have to reorganize their relation. It costs a lot for the people around the world. It costs a lot for the people, like a war, like a new occupation, or new conflict between these big powers. At the same time, we have, when the big powers are like that, they cannot arrange themselves, like after Second World War. We see that the small powers in each region, they are also putting their points, like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. They want to have exactly the same deal as Israel in the Middle East. They don't care if they can work together or not. They are trying exactly to do the same things when the big powers cannot organize them or smash them, and they try to do exactly the same influence like them. As we see, we have the third corner, or the third way that between the tension, as Fariba said, we see mostly these two pools actually, the big powers, other powers, regions powers, local power, we see the big imperialists, but we have the people too. And I don't want to idealize the people and the uprising of the people, because you have the class character, you have the social character, you have religion, etc., many bullshit that are in the people uprising. At the same time, you have the pictures that Nadine showed us. You have the heroes and the people, they need it. But if we look at the movements, and we see that they are dividing, polarizing between this situation, but at the same time, they don't want them. That's the potential, and that's the point that, as Fariba said, we have to support it, or if we want to do something, that's the way, or that's the place. Here we have to dance. And I stop now. I try to continue during the questions or other things. Thank you.